We are now live streaming and I will share the PowerPoint and get us started.
Very good. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Ann. I wanted to let you know that Wesley Wood is my great co-chair is at a state level meeting this week, so he is not with me today. So I miss him already, but we'll move on. So thank you all for being here. We have a good afternoon plan. I think we're going to make some good progress this afternoon, and that we will build on the progress we make today in our November meeting. So our first order is to approve the agenda for today. So if I can have a motion either in the chat or in the out loud that to approve the agenda that we have sent out for today's meeting.
This is Vivian Covington, so moved.
Thank you, Vivian. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any corrections or additions? If not, all in favor of approving the agenda, please unmute and give a reaction. Aye.
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 Okay. All right. The second thing is to approve the minutes from the September 22nd, 2021 meeting. This meeting, you discussed the different measures that we have been talking about since our last several meetings. So could I have a motion to approve the minutes from the September 22nd meeting, please?
Approve, Kim Creamer.
Thank you, Kim. I have a second, please.
Second, Sarah Koenig.
Thank you, Sarah. Any additions or corrections or discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, if we could have you unmute, and if you are in positive affirmation for the minutes, you can say aye.
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 Or any opposed, which I did not ask on the agenda. Any abstentions? Okay, so we have an agenda and we have our minutes approved from our last meeting. Thank you all. All right, so again, the next, we always put up our norms for our meetings. So thank you all. This group is great about contributing and collaborating. So please, we hope you keep that up today because we're going to be in breakout sessions twice. So we look forward to your contributions to our meeting and to the work that we're doing on the licensure subcommittee. So thank you for that. In the next slide, we have, just as a reminder, the guiding principles for our work. And so do these measures, and we have the idea on the slide, do these measures have impact on students in the classroom? And is it measurable in an authentic setting or the presence of students, or does it meet one of these two guiding principles? So there's some things measures that we use that may not be measurable in the authentic setting, but would have an impact on students in some way. So these are kind of our guiding questions and our guiding principles when we think about this work of determining the list of measures that we would possibly want to see considered as part of this work. The good thing about our subcommittee work is that we are not having to create a which measure goes in which place yet. Our goal by the end of November, or by our November meeting, is to say, here are the considerations for each of the measures that we've deliberated on, and we think these would be good, but there are some cautions for them, or if we have cautions for them, and here's some other measures that we may think of between now and then. We're going to begin with the same measures that we've been talking about the last few months. So I think that's a good piece of our work that we've got some clarification on, that we don't have to say this, we can use it as a consideration, but we don't have to talk about exactly what level we think it should go in unless we have an opinion or a consideration. So the next slide talks about the subcommittee's visual and how the subcommittees overlap. I think this is a really good reminder for us about where we are, and just in case anybody was wondering, we probably have the most difficult job. I'm sure every subcommittee thinks they have the most difficult job, but licensure and measures for licensure is a very, it's a difficult topic when there's not a lot of reliable and valid measures out there for us to consider. So This shows you the overlap and where we are in overlap for the different subcommittees. And there's going to be some subcommittee work across after we get to a point in November so that we can move forward and try to blend this work together for a larger recommendation. And Patrick Miller is here with us today, and he has that task. So welcome, Patrick, and thank you for taking that on. So any questions on this slide that Kim can answer? All right. And then the next slide is our vision map, which are the different levels. You know, we've talked about these levels going on from the license 1 learning permit to license 4, and then the advanced teachers. So this is just a reminder of where we are. But again, we don't have to say this is what we would do for license 3, license 2. Specifically, we can give that recommendation, but we're looking at the measures in general and trying to get down to what we think about each measure. Okay. So that's our goal today for our meeting, to discuss and determine considerations or recommendations for each possible measure. And in the next chart, these are the things that some of this we worked on last time and the time before, and some of this is information that came to us from our presentations. And this talks about different measures, the measure type being on the left. There are 6 of them, starting with content knowledge licensure exams and ending with micro-credentialing, which we've had a lot of discussion and talk and presentations on. And in the middle, there are observational measures, student surveys, measures of student learning, portfolios and performance assessments. And then across, it talks about whether it can measure content or skill, content skill application for pre-service or experienced or later career teachers. Pre-service and early career being put together. So I think this is a really good chart for us to think about in terms of, you know, do we think this measures content skill and how that correlates with, say, our NESES instrument and how part of the NESES instrument measures content, part of it measures pedagogy, some of it measures skill. So these things come across in different ways. So this is what we're going to do today in our breakouts. We have 2 breakout sessions. And so the first breakout session, we're going to discuss an assigned measure. So we're going to give you one of the, we're going to have 6 breakout rooms. We're going to have 6, and then each breakout room will have 1 measure. And then under that measure, what you're going to do is you're going to have a recommendation and considerations for that measure. So considerations could be pros, cons, things we need to think about. It could also be a recommendation, could be, I see this for early career teachers, but not late career teachers. It could be whatever your group thinks we need to think about in terms of considerations for each of these different sets of measures. And then what we're going to do, we're going to let you have about 35 minutes in those groups to discuss one measure. We're going to divide these up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come back, have a little conversation about that. Then we're going to go back into your breakout groups. And then in the second breakout group, you're going to be able to go to any other measure and write whatever you want to think about we should consider or recommend around that measure. So that will be kind of a free write where you could go in and say, we had observation, or we had micro-credentials, so we did that in group 1, but now I want to go through and look what the other recommendations and considerations are, and I really want to say something about this one or this one, and that way you'll have a time in your group to discuss those. So you have free range in the second breakout group to look at any of the other ones that you want to look at. And you can also do that after the meeting's over as well. There'll be a time period for the next, say, 10 days where those will be open for you to go in and put comments that you want to put comments in. Because our goal is to take all of those comments and recommendations, what I call pretty them up in terms of like making it a fluid document, and then come back in November and say, have we captured everything everyone wants to say about each of these measures and each of the recommendations under the measure, and then determine our overall consensus on the different measures. So that's where we're going over 2 months. So we have to start by thinking about what are our recommendations or considerations for each of those. Any questions about what we're going to do?
And can
So
I
you
also
see, you're going to, go ahead, sorry.
can I also add that please put the name of your group members next to whatever the group one members, and then the colon. Just make sure you list your members' names because we want to keep them for November.
Good. Anything else, Kim?
And just down at the bottom, you'll notice that you'll have to scroll back and forth to be able to see all of the measures that are going to be focused on. And we have also added in the folder, not just this matrix, and it's a shared matrix for across all groups. So everybody will have access to the same matrix, but you'll also have access to this PowerPoint and also the measures PowerPoint that Melissa Tooley and Megan Comstock went over a few months ago, so that you can have that as a reference point if you have questions around the benefits or considerations for, or the definition for each of those measures, just so that we're clear on what materials we have.
So the other thing to know that I had to ask Kim is you can add lines in this. So this is a SharePoint document, which means it's a shared Microsoft Word document or Excel. I'm not sure which one it is. Kim,
Right, it's a spreadsheet.
yeah, it's a spreadsheet. So you can add lines. You can add space, you can add lines under. So this is not all the room you have. If you want more room, you can just add it on there by right-clicking and adding a line underneath or whatever the language is. Questions? So this is a shared doc. So think about it like a Google Doc, but it's not a Google Doc. It is a SharePoint doc. And you're going to be able to go into this, put in your things, and we have group, and you're going to be put into a group to begin. Any questions on the logistics? I think you got it. You're a bunch of smart people, so I think we're cool. So the other thing to know is you need to, somebody's got to write it down, right? So you need a note taker or somebody that's going to take the notes for the group. Hey, all right, Kim, want to go to the next one? Okay, so these are the measure assignments. So group 1 will do student surveys, group 2 will do micro-credentials, 3 licensure exams, 4 observational measures, 5 measures of student learning, 6 portfolios or performance test, okay? That's in group breakout session number 1, and then we'll come back. So you're gonna be in one group, and whatever your group assignment is here, and then once you go to your breakout room, and we'll have this up for you once you go out, so you'll know, oh, I'm in this group, we need to talk about X. And once you get in there, you're gonna choose a note taker, and then talk about that, and then you're gonna come back, and then we'll go back in. So, all right. Shall we get started? Any questions before we do? All right, so we're gonna have 35 minutes. Kim's gonna put you in groups. Kim, you just let us know when we're ready.
I'm ready.
All right. Hearing no further questions, you've been assigned to a group. It should be at the maybe top right of your screen, depending on how you've got your screen set up. And you're assigned to a group. So if you're assigned to group 2, you're going to be working on micro-credentials. So I look forward to you joining your groups. And anyone that's observing today certainly can join a group as well. Jeff, do you want to join a group or no? Join a group. Andrew joined a group. Kim. Welcome back. Thank you all. Okay, so let's do a little sharing, and you can click through your document if you want to along with it. So for group one, if we can have someone just give the highlights, a couple of things they thought were important that they wrote down. They did a good job making a long list, so that's important for us as we move forward. So student surveys, can we have someone from student surveys just give some highlights from their time together?
Sure, Dr. Bullock, this is Andrew. I'm going to, good afternoon. I'm going to run through them, and then if either of my two colleagues want to jump in, please feel free to do so. But since I was typing, I'll take the front of this. So we had a couple of pros for student surveys. One is that it allows students to have a voice in the process of their learning. Also thought it was a pro that it gives tangible feedback for teacher reflection and improvement processes. There's another pro that the surveys can help teachers find trends as it relates to their pedagogy. Two more pros. One is research suggests that student surveys are an accurate measure of teacher effectiveness, particularly when used as one of multiple measures. And it also fleshes out culture, climate, student engagement, and student-teacher relationship. We also had 4 cons there. One is that it may not be as objective a measure as something like a test. And if the survey is only administered once, it may not be reflective or a more complete picture of the classroom. So there was some thinking within our group about, is it possible to maybe do a survey like that maybe multiple times throughout the course of a year to get a more holistic picture of what's going on. Another con is that it may be challenging to convince the field that student surveys are a viable method of collection. And then lastly, another con is that the student survey may not capture the rigor of the instruction in isolation. So there may be some challenges there as well. So that's our list on that. Did you, Dr. Bullock, do you want me to move on to the other area that we looked at, or do we just want to hold there for a second?
If we could just hold there, that'd be great.
Okay.
Anybody else from your group? Thank you, Andrew. That was very clear.
Thank you.
Anybody else from your group want to add anything? I do have a question for your group. Did you have any conversation yet about initial licensure versus advanced licensure with student survey? Did I miss that, or just that wasn't in your conversation yet?
It's interesting. I think we talked about that, and ladies jump in if I misrepresent here. I feel like we might have talked about that under the micro-credentials side of things, as opposed to the student survey side of things.
Listing.
Yeah.
So, okay, all right. So that might be something that if someone adds to that, if they have thoughts on, the first part of licensure versus advanced, what I call advanced licensure, like a more seasoned teacher, if you have comments on that, or if this group wants to go back and has comments on that, I think that would be something that we might want to think about for all these, right? Like if we have an opinion on that.
This is Connie. Tamika did mention that. She mentioned that she felt that the student surveys would be more beneficial for teachers that have been in the field longer versus those looking for licensure or seeking licensure.
Yeah. So Kim, if we could add that, that would be great.
I'll put that in right now.
Thank you, Andrew. So thank you, Connie. All right. Any questions for group one so far? All right, great. So the micro-credentialing group?
This is Lee. Brad, feel free to jump in. So we are concerned about the use of micro-credentials to displace teacher ed programs. We do have additional concerns about the standardization and the vetting of micro-credentials and what that would look like as far as like a fidelity of implementation across the state. We can see it as a way for licensed teachers to advance in the profession by using micro-credentials, but just want to be sure that it's not used in the initial licensing phase. And if used, we would hope that there's some kind of an approval process I put similar to the APP approval process, but just some kind of approval process for accepting micro-credentials to get back to that second idea of standardization and vetting.
Great. Andrew, did you say y'all had already added some stuff to that one? Did you add it under?
I'm sorry, what did you say, Ann?
I was asking Andrew, he had said something about micro-credentialing in his conversation, I thought. Am I wrong, Andrew?
Yeah, there's some stuff in there under group 1 if you kind of scroll up.
Gotcha.
So they had a couple extra minutes, so they went to another measure.
Perfect. So, so if everybody clicks on that tab, you'll see that group 1 has already added some stuff in there, with their thoughts about micro-credentialing. So, we've got a good list going for that. Is anybody else from, Lee, thank you. Is anyone else from group 2 want to add anything in? Or any questions for group 2? All right. Licensure exams.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question more, to provide, sorry, my internet's a little funky. Can you just say a little bit more about the concern of micro-credentials replacing teacher education?
Say, you're going in and out. Did you want, you can say something. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just asking if you could elaborate a little bit more on the concern about micro-credentials replacing teacher education.
So
I'm going to let Brad jump in on that.
Okay, sure. So I think when we had heard from some of the examples of the use of micro-credentials, they were all being used to advance teacher licenses, not necessarily to be a way to clear an initial teacher license. And so that's what we were thinking. Now, I see the one thing we didn't, that we talked about in the past, we didn't really consider this time was, was having as an alternative to a test. That's something that I think could be used for it. We might could add that here, but when Lee and I talked, we didn't want this to be viewed as something that people could sort of piecemeal parts to then get their clear license.
So I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Brad, but are you saying like, kind of like the RLC used to be able to like take a piece here, and kind of put it together instead of having a package, which if they were in a residency program, for example, they would have a package, or an initial licensure program, they would have a package.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Okay, all right. Group 3 licensure exams.
Hey, this is Andy, and I'm gonna present for Chris Tabari and myself. So considerations we wanted to raise, wanted to know if there are any other options for licensure exams, like other than the Praxis ones that are content focused. I think we continue to raise questions about, is the test measuring what we want it to measure? Are the exams, is there any kind of, so if the answer to that question is yes, it's measuring exactly what we want it to measure, then it makes sense to have it as a pretty strict kind of entry point. But if it's a little bit fuzzy, or it's not super clear that that passing the test translates to something that is ultimately benefiting students, then are we preventing people who would be good teachers but who don't pass the test, whether they've got anxiety or a number of reasons? Are we ending up preventing them from teaching? So that's not a new thought, but that's just a continued question in our minds. We do think that we understand that like our specific thing was around content, but we want to just keep putting out there pedagogy, and the effectiveness of delivery is also important. We think the benefit is benefits are the standardization of them. It's very parallel to standardized test scores for kids, all the benefits of those. It also has a lot of negatives, but that is a benefit. And our last idea was, so in the matrix, it has these content exams kind of on the early part of things, and that presumes kind of a pass-fail. So where it's just being used as a minimum floor. We did wonder about if you moved across the matrix to the right, to the later career, would it be worth having the license exam score? So not just whether you passed or failed, but your score, could that be one of several buckets of evidence that a teacher could use to make the case for going up into the progression of the more advanced licenses? I don't think we're 100% saying that. We're not recommending that, but we're recommending that that we explore that or get other thoughts on it. Chris or Tabari, anything that I left out?
No,
I don't think so. I think
go ahead, Chris.
you're fine. I was just going to say, I think he covered what I remember us discussing.
Chris, it was only 10 minutes ago.
Well, Chris is living it. He's living
Thanks,
life right now. He is subbing for a math class and teaching that and doing this at the same time. So
Talk about multitasking, Chris. You're all
yeah, that's a whole other role in the matrix.
Yeah, so I'm in favor of getting as many people into the profession as we can.
okay. Starting today? Like
Yes,
right
please.
now. Yeah. Thank you. So, all right, any questions for group 3 or anything to add? Any other comments? Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Chris.
I have one. So right now, the way that the advanced teacher role is written, it's about effectiveness in the classroom. So I was actually surprised that about the suggestion to use content licensure exam scores that might have been taken like 5 or 6 years before that to be used as a criterion for determining that. Could you say a little bit why you sort of thought that was relevant to being that exam score would be relevant to demonstrating classroom excellence, as opposed to looking at like actual practice in the classroom?
Well, now that's a bit of a loaded question. But I will say that this was our thinking on that is when somebody's in that position of seeking the advanced license, what are all the possible data points that we could have? Would one of those data points, even though it might have been taken, 4 or 5 years prior, as you point out, would one of those be their kind of relative score to some kind of national norm on the exam? Like if they were really high on the content on the exam that they took, is that any kind of signal about their mastery of the content of that? And we would presume that it hasn't gone down since that initial thing. So I think that was part of our thinking. We were thinking about it not as in the spirit of people having multiple options to get on the, to progress in the things that they choose, and could that be one?
This is Vivian. I could also see perhaps we don't use it in the beginning, but we use it later. And then that's a measure of how well you do know your content, because you certainly can't teach it if you don't know it. People who get really high LSAT scores, or people who get high scores to get into med school, I mean, people tout those when they go to get a job, right? If you're trying to get into a particular firm. So they're used in lots of different ways in other professions. So I think it's an interesting thing to ponder.
Good. Okay, back to you, Anne.
Okay, thanks. Melissa, did that answer your question? Okay, all right, thank you. Anyone else have a question? And I do appreciate people turning on their cameras when they have questions. That's awesome. So I know you're there. So, all right. So, and Melissa, put a note in the chat as well. Or back to you, Andy. So you want to check that out. So, part of our discussion is continues. All right. So, group 4, observational measures. Who's going to speak for this group?
I'm happy to do it. This is Vivian. I will turn my camera on. Robert, and we had we were graced with our illustrious PEPSC chair, Patrick, in our group, so he can chime in as well. We enjoyed our conversation with him, and also Maya. So we just talked about considering other tools beyond NESIS. I know a couple institutions in the state use what's called the CPAS out of Ohio State University that has validity and reliability. It's used at midpoint for significant feedback where the actual teacher, in our case, the student teacher, has to have input on what they're doing well, what they're not doing well, where they need help, and kind of a growth plan, and then it's used evaluative at the end. It has an online reliability training for the rater that has to be redone every year. You have to refresh. So it has some things I think that NESIS maybe doesn't have. But I brought that up. My point of bringing that up is something that is directing people to where their skills are good and where their skills are not good, and focus on where to improve to help them move along from learning permit. We said probably up to license 3 that probably is not as helpful a tool, maybe at 4, 5, and 6, where somebody is really good at their craft. Robert brought up that they use this idea of minimum performance expectations and meet basic licensure level requirements. So at that point, in order to move along or to be able to get to the next level, you do have to meet those minimum performance expectations. We talked about walkthroughs, how those are valuable, but they're very different depending on the district. So if you wanted that to be more uniform, right now it isn't, but teachers seem to like that and the feedback it gives them. And I guess where this kind of got stuck with me, is it more formative or is it evaluative when we're talking about observation? So we discussed that for a little while too. License 4+ needs some different measures. Maybe it's less evaluative at that point and more about honing their craft. Should people have a combination of items to be able to meet the performance expectation and or to move forward on the level, like could national boards be used or master's pay? We know that shows commitment to the profession. It is retention. Can people use a licensure exam and their observations or evaluations plus something else? Because we feel like the way it is now, you can't just exit someone from the profession based on one item, but this way people could be able to triangulate. This is what I think I'm doing well, and this is shown here, here, and here. Or the school system could say, you're not meeting that because it's shown here, here, and here on those items. And then compensation can be one of the incentives to keep someone growing or to qualify them for the next license or more money. So if you meet the minimum expectations at license 1 and you want to stay there 6 years and you're meeting minimum expectations and you're okay with that salary, that's fine. But to move along, you may have to do X, Y, or Z, and the incentive there would be to make more money. I think that's most of what we talked about. Please feel free to add.
Thank you, Vivian.
You're welcome.
Any questions or further comments from the group, or any questions for observational measures at this point?
And could you say again what the other measure was, not the NESIS, but what that you referred to?
It's called the CPAS, CPAST. I should know what it stands for right off the top of my head, but I can't. I know the ST is student teaching, and it is out of Ohio State University. And we have to use it. It's no cost, but we have to share our data with them, blind data, and they are continuing to do research around that to make sure it's valid and reliable, and to continue with the training for inter-rater reliability. So
It stands for Candidate Pre-Service Assessment Student Teaching.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. So,
I'm only the assistant dean. I just know enough to be dangerous. I don't really know a lot.
We can't remember all of our acronyms in this profession. So, all right, and thank you, Superintendent Miller, for joining that group. So, all right, group 5, which is measures of student learning.
Hi, this is Leah Sutton. I am standing in for my colleague Brenda Berg today. So great to see you and be with y'all today. Jill and Sarah and I had a great conversation. We sort of emphasized that, you know, one of the challenges with measures of student learning is that we don't have them for a lot of our teachers, and sort of focused on this idea that that's okay because we have a menu of measures and some teachers won't have EVOS. But there's a lot of things that can be chosen from sort of to use as a measure for advancement. But we also talked about are there ways that we can get more EVOS data from teachers. So we talked a little bit about returning to some of the final exams at the high school level that are really valuable, provide valuable student and teacher information in the core subjects in high school. Or is there a way, if we really transition as superintendent would like to competency-based education, is there a way to use those measures and those assessments to get student growth data? So we talked a little bit about that, whether or not the work keys assessments and the credentials that students are getting through the work keys could be used as measures of student learning for CTE teachers. So if there are some sort of options for how to get more measures for teachers who don't have them now. And then we also just talked about making sure that growth is a factor for renewal for any teachers that have the data. So essentially a teacher can't renew or can't advance to these higher levels if they don't have the growth data. Jill and Sarah, add anything that I missed, please.
That's perfect, Leah.
Thank you, Leah.
This is Lee. Can I just interject some information around work keys? So I work in CTE, and I'm so glad that y'all thought of CTE teachers and definitely counting certifications and credentials that students earn. That's definitely a fantastic measure of CTE instruction and learning. But the work keys test is commonly misunderstood. It uses CTE concentrators as the pool of students who take the test, but it's in no way a direct measure of what's happening in a CTE classroom. It's measuring reading, math and science, locating information, that kind of thing. So it's really, you know, across the whole educational experience. So I don't think I would consider work keys for any, it's great as a school report card measure. I'm not sure I would count it as for any particular teacher measure.
Thanks, Lee. So what about there's the bonus program for credentials for CTE teachers. What about like just looking at this many of your students got a credential?
Yeah, definitely those, because those are aligned directly to course content. And we do have those tiered and vetted by the North Carolina Chamber. So that's an excellent resource for CTE teachers.
Thanks. I'll edit our comments.
We needed you in our group, Lee, because none of us had the answer about work keys. So you just gave it to us. We weren't sure.
Exactly. Thank you for that.
And when we go back into our next group, that could be added with that in that information. Or Lee, are you adding that now? Is that what you're doing? Good.
And I can put it in group 1 just as my comment from group 1 too.
That would be perfect. I really appreciate that. Okay. Any questions, comments, or further discussion on group 5's initial? Excellent. And then our last group is group 6. Somebody going to share from group 6?
That would be Jeff, Kim, Melissa, and Virginia.
I think Melissa was taking notes. Melissa, do you mind sharing?
If we lost Melissa, I can talk. You want me to go ahead and start talking? If Melissa comes on, I'll stop and she can read the notes.
That sounds great.
Okay. I think I remember. Y'all step in if I forget, or Melissa, if you come in, just interrupt me. So I'm speaking from one of the things that we talked about.
I'm here.
Oh, you are? Okay. Yep.
I could hear you, but I couldn't unmute, but I'm back.
Okay.
I'm happy to
Go
take
ahead,
it.
Melissa,
If you don't, if you sound like you want to, you can go for it though. You sure?
Okay. Well, why don't I do the portfolios and then you do the
That sounds great.
with advanced teacher. Okay. So we talked about with the portfolios for entry teachers that we felt like the portfolios were we wanted to keep something standard in place, and whether that stays at TPA or not may be debatable. I know that's not, some people just don't like it, but we felt like having a standard portfolio that students take initially was a good idea, and that our general consensus was, it's okay if that stays at TPA, but that after that initial demonstration, if they fail that within a certain margin, so students who just miss the boat completely, then maybe they have to redo that. But if not, then having some way that the students can demonstrate it in a different way. So if they're low on task 2 or if they're low on the assessment piece, task 3, rather than just redo that piece, maybe they do a micro-credential to learn more about that piece and then have a demonstration of that learning attached to the micro-credential, so that then they can still be in a learning mode rather than just a redoing mode, and advancing them forward, but an avenue which they could then get licensed outside of just repeating the exact same assessment that didn't work for them to demonstrate their knowledge. And again, we think that should be within a certain range, of a score range from the cut score that they're allowed to do that. Did I miss anything, Melissa?
I would just offer, we had a conversation about portfolios versus performance assessments. So it says portfolios - performance tests in this category, but we made a distinction between them, and the portfolios are those collections of artifacts that are typically submitted in a internal process, perhaps to inform professional development, and are not necessarily part of like a standardized scoring process with any kind of like external evaluators. And for that reason, didn't think that portfolios in sort of the traditional sense were sufficient for an up-down decision like licensure, and that for that you need to have a more consistent, externally evaluated and validated performance assessment. And performance assessments use a portfolio-focused approach, but that is sort of the distinction that we drew, in that like portfolios are sort of not something to be considered as a measure for licensure, but that performance assessments that use a portfolio approach are. So just wanted to clarify that distinction. And at one point, we had also had a conversation about whether there could be a alternative to EdTPA that had a North Carolina specific set of well-trained, unbiased reviewers doing that entry-level performance assessment if there is concerns with the Pearson EdTPA process. But the real importance being that the people evaluating the candidates don't know those candidates or don't have like a vested interest in those candidates passing or not passing. And then the other piece I will just add is where we talked about later career teachers and the national board certification process, and thinking that national board is a good option for later career teachers to demonstrate their advanced level of combined content and pedagogical knowledge, and that it is actually probably a good tool. We didn't discuss this, but just sort of thinking about for those teachers that don't have EBOS, that national board is a content subject specific assessment. And so for advanced teachers could be a way to demonstrate that advanced teacher classroom excellence option, not the advanced teacher for mentoring, but the one that says, I really understand my content and my pedagogy in this area that I'm teaching, and that we sort of were talking about like how to incorporate the national board certification into, it currently says, I think, demonstrates highly effective ratings 3 out of 5 years, and whether, should it count for 1 year, should it count for 3 years? of that highly effective reading, but it should at least fulfill some portion of those highly effective reading requirements for that classroom excellence advanced teacher role.
Thank you, Melissa. Any other comments, contributions, questions for Group 6 portfolios performance test?
And this is Vivian, I just put something in the chat that someone said if you miss by 1 point redoing the whole EdTPA, you don't have to redo the whole EdTPA. You can do one part of it. It's $100 and it's something you've already done and you're retooling it. So you've learned from it, in my opinion. And starting over with a micro-credential in times of time comparison for that teacher would be something to think about. And also, I don't know if micro-credentials are free or if they cost, the cost differential between that. So just some other things to think about.
And I guess we were thinking, and I think you could still have that option, like if the student wanted to redo a section for the $100, but that for the students that, I mean, it's kind of like we talked about it with differentiation in a classroom. You have that student who can't pass the, the essay on the test, but could tell you about it all day long, So we were just kind of trying to think outside the box on another option for people.
Thank you, Kim. All right.
And one quick question. So I think someone referred to master's degrees earlier, and I'm sitting here trying in my own head to figure out where they fit into these 6. Where does a master's degree fit in? No one actually discussed them in any of these 6 groups. Is that a measure of effectiveness, or is it a measure of something else, or where does that fit in? And if this isn't the right time to ask that question, then we can defer it to the next round.
So I think that's a really good question, Jill, because there could be work. So some master's degrees in ed have national board built in, right, for prep for national board. Some master's degrees have content built in. Most master's degrees have pedagogy built in, right? I mean, that's kind of the emphasis of an MED. Would be more, sometimes it's content and pedagogy, sometimes it's more pedagogy, and some have national board. So I would say that that's a great question for people to think about. We're getting ready to go back into these measures and people can add things. But Jill, I think that's a great question to think about of where do you think a master's degree content and what kind of master's degree might fit under which one of these measures? That would be a great addition. I can see where I think it would fit, but I'd like and if anybody would like to comment now, feel free to comment in response to Jill.
This is Vivian. I would just say that many of them also have action research built in to solve a classroom problem or a school problem. And if that indeed is what we want micro-credentialing to be, to really investigate something. I mean, I know from the presentations we had, action research was a part of that. So if we value that for micro-credentialing, I think we should value that in master's degree in terms of showing that you're able to improve. So I think we need to add it as a measure of somewhere. National board certification, you hear people say, well, people who write really well can pass that. Well, people say that about master's degrees. Well, if you're just a good course taker, but there are value for each of them, I think.
Right. So Melissa read something in the chat. So it's not, so I would say that Melissa, thinking about it, Melissa wrote, Melissa, I'm going to read what you wrote. I think the master's degree is a way to gain the knowledge to demonstrate competency, but it's not a demonstration of competency in and of itself. I do think any demonstration of competency connected to a master's degree could be considered, though. So in teacher education accreditation, so in response to Melissa's comment, I would agree that it wouldn't be the awarding of the master's degree, would be like what Vivian was saying, like the action research project within the master's degree. And any type of, you could have any type of EPP created assessment, AKA an action research project or a content project or anything like that, have its own reliability and validity, because anything that EPPs do under accreditation now needs to have, and used as an assessment, a true assessment tool has to have its own reliability and validity. So I think there's a way that those measures could be put on an options list. Comments or questions?
Can I ask a follow-up question about those action research projects and who is the assessor, whether it's someone within the program or someone outside of the program?
It depends. It's typically within the program, and it's typically, like in our program, it would have an inter-rater reliability. There would have been an inter-rater reliability process to that, and it wouldn't necessarily be the instructor of the course.
Thank you. I just sort of to the point that we made earlier about sort of portfolios versus performance-based assessments, that when it's related to licensure as opposed to, you know, sort of making it up or down licensure determination versus, you know, this is a way to sort of help you grow and sort of understand your own professional development, that it does seem necessary to have it be reviewed by an external reviewer as opposed to somebody who is sort of within the program, even just because there's, you know, even if it's not intended to be subjective, there's just, it's hard to keep some of those human nature elements at bay. And so to have it be standardized across different, to have one entity sort of across North Carolina making that determination for like all teachers submitting those types of things would be would allow for more consistency, where you don't have teachers saying, well, this person submitted this thing and mine was better, but they passed and I didn't, or because it might be within the institution that there's inter-rater reliability, but that doesn't mean between institutions that there's inter-rater reliability, and I think that's the concern.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying, Melissa, is that if you had something like an action research project, it could be consistent across, and there could be, and that could lead to like an option if somebody could use to turn into whatever entity as well, just like National Board. Yeah.
I also think there's sorry, Ann.
Go ahead, Vivian.
I also think there's another party if we go back to our charge about what's good for students. If a master's degree continues to keep someone who is at a license 4 or a license 5 who's already proven they've done something in the profession, that's good for schools. We don't have turnover. So there's another whole retention piece to things like National Board if they come with money, or master's degree if they come with money. That is good for students in the classroom because you don't have as much turnover if that person has demonstrated competency and indeed they're trying to get to another level.
Okay. Other comments on that? Jill, you brought up a great question. So, good point. All right, so now we have 30 minutes left, so we're gonna take about 20 minutes, and I want you to be able to go back into your groups and then click on the bottom on the different measures and add anything you wanna add, either individually or as a group onto these different measures. So for example, if you're in group 1 and you go into portfolios, which the portfolio green tab, please put your considerations and comments under the group 1 area for that tab. For example, or if you're in group 3, please put them under group 3. Don't add them to where group 6 put theirs, put them under your group. So you're gonna still you can make comments on any of the 6 measures, and you're just gonna put them under your group for that measure. And we're gonna take about 20 minutes to do that, and then we're just gonna come back and wrap up. So questions on what we're gonna do now. I want you to make sure you have time to like make the comments. You've brought up some great points. So make those comments under your group going forward.
I feel like I should have my license revoked because that just finally made sense to me why all those boxes were on all those things. It's like a little more linear. A little more linear than that those boxes are allowing.
It's all about breakout 2. The whole form can go brilliantly around breakout two. So, and this is a way to make sure we capture what we need to capture, right? So, all right. So Kim is going to send you off to your groups, and I'll see you in about 20 minutes.
Okay. I just see that Jeff rejoined. What group were you in, Jeff?
I was in Melissa, Kimberly, and
group 6.
Virginia's group 6.
Okay. I'm sending everyone on their way.
Thank you, Kim.
Sure.
And where should we add comments about the master's degree if we have those?
Wherever you think it would fit. And
Okay.
then, Kim, if you want to add another sheet after group 6 that says anything, I'll add it right here. Anything else I want to say, and we'll just.
You could just put additional comments, and then they can put what group they are next to it.
Okay, I'm just making another tab at the bottom that says additional comments, and I'm gonna put, and then people can just, I made it kind of wide, and then you can just add it there if you're not comfortable.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Kim, could you send a little blast that says I've added that they can see?
Yes, let me see if I can send a message to all the groups.
Yeah. And I don't know how to make it tab color. Let's see. Get purple. Light purple. Okay, thanks.
Anne, did you get that message?
Your message? Like on my.
Yes. Did you get it? Did you see it?
On my phone or on the chat?
No, just for the breakout.
Oh, did I?
It should go to all participants regardless.
Yeah.
I just thought maybe you would have seen it.
I didn't see it.
It's okay.
So hopefully. Oh, somebody's in there. So, okay. L.O., whoever that is. Lee O'Neill's in there. Hey, Kim.
Hey, Ann.
How much? Okay, 1 minute. I thought we were getting close. That's what I was.
Yeah, it's about 10 seconds, 5 seconds or something until everybody comes back.
50 seconds.
That's right.
So we did have a few people put some comments in the.
Additional?
Just a few, but I want to make sure I mention that.
Sure. When everybody, like you said, they can go back and.
So I think
can you give them just 5 days, because we need to be able to consolidate that, and the November meetings are.
What if we gave them till like a week, till next Wednesday? Like
okay, that's fine.
That's fine. And then could you send out an email stating that? Would you mind doing that?
Sure. I mean, when I send the minutes, I will definitely send that email. Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Thanks. Hey, Melissa and Kimberly, welcome back.
Thanks.
So thanks everyone for adding your comments. I wanted to point out, if you didn't see the message or you had joined, some people had put some stuff in. So I added an additional tab on the bottom of the form that says additional comments. So this was based on Jill's question and people not necessarily knowing where to put that information. But if there's some things that, there's some personal shout outs about group 1 in there, but if there's some other stuff that you would like to add here, that you don't know exactly where to put it, but I want to make sure that it's considered, this is the spot to do that, kind of like the parking lot, so to say. The other thing to know is this form will be available to you for 1 more week. So if you wake up tonight in the middle of the night and you think of something and you think, oh, that's what I need to think about that, or you're in a meeting and you think of something, feel free to add to any of these measures under your group till next Wednesday. And then we'll take that down and get it ready, so we'll have it ready for our November meeting. At our November meeting, we're going to try to bring a draft of all this information in kind of a report style, so to say, a recommendation style that we're going to then go through and have out to you before the meeting, and then try to discuss that and see if we're ready to at least do our first round of recommendations back to the centralized group, so to say. So I want to thank everybody that's hung with us and gone through both rounds. I know some people dropped out after the second round because they knew we were just going to wrap up. So are there any questions, concerns, or comments anyone would like to make at this time before we depart?
This is Kim. I just wanted to add one thing. If anybody is not able to access these documents, please email me and I will try to send an individual invitation to access them, because that seems to work better than the group invitation. So please reach out to me if you're having trouble with that.
So thank you, Andy, for telling us about Chris. So Chris has had a fun day. All right, so could I have a motion for dismissal of the meeting, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Kimberly. And a second?
Second.
This is Sarah, second.
Thank you. All right, so I will just say that we can vote on dismissal or we can just dismiss. So given that we have a motion, a second, all those in favor of dismissing, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Thank you. Thank you all for a productive meeting. I hope you have a great week and enjoy this weather. And if you're brave, I hope you are going to the state fair. Be safe. Kim, did you want to say anything about Patrick's email, except that are you talking about the fact that we'll meet next month and then after that we're going to take a hiatus for a few months? That's going to be the because we
right to be able to synthesize. Then Patrick will lead that charge on synthesizing the recommendations from each of the 4 subcommittees to then be able to put everything together, so then the subcommittees can see it in a holistic.
Totality.
Yes.
Yeah, so we'll meet next month and then we'll take a hiatus for a few months so we can have the census done. So we can look at the bigger picture. So we will be back, but it will be in the spring. So thank you all. Go ahead, Kim.
I do also want to say that in December, we are working on providing more information around micro-credentials for all 4 of the subcommittees. So those meetings aren't necessarily canceled, but it might be where 2 subcommittees meet at once. But I don't have the dates for those yet. So just be aware that I'll be sending emails about that.
Yeah, and people might have options, right? Like they could join this meeting or that meeting if they want to hear the information.
Right. I'm just going to see what works best.
Okay. All right, logistics queen. We look forward to getting that from you. All right. So everybody have a great day. Yes, Melissa, I would agree. There's a lot of confusion and a lot of back and forth about micro-credentialing and what it can do and can't do. So that'd be a great addition. All right. Thank you all. You are dismissed.
Thank you.
Yep,
Thanks, Dr. Fuller.
bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Yes.